Well, the Pahalgam terror attack killed 26 innocents. Many of them were killed right in front of their sons, their wives, their mothers, their brothers, their sisters, their friends. It was a public spectacle, and it's a trauma that will never be erased. You had children who witnessed their parents being shot right on the head. That kind of trauma will continue, and unfortunately for them, you have the media now trying to get reactions, howling many of those victims and their victims' family members to try and get an understanding of what happened on the fateful day. I don't blame the media. We need to have testimonies. But what happens in the long run when we speak of trauma of an act like this? We have, of course, some images. If I could show you some images there. Let me cut across to some images that we have there of Bitan Adhikari. He was in fact killed right in front of his 3-year-old son. There you have it, a family image there of his 3-year-old son. It was heartbreaking to see how the mother was grieving. She was in fact inconsolable, and the son was largely quiet. We saw the boy there who just did not speak. He's too young to speak, but you should know that he saw his father being shot right at the head. What happens to him and his mental health? If I could take you through another image, that's a wife where you had Suvendu Adhikari of West Bengal holding the son. He's in fact assured that he's going to help in every way, give every possible aid to the child. All right, let me take you through Shailesh Bhai Kalathia. That's 44-year-old Shailesh, who was killed right in front of his son again. That's a family there. Images of his mortal remains being taken home. And that's that little boy. He's been speaking to the media extensively because there's really nobody to stop him. Father has died. The mother is grieving. The media is, of course, shoving mics at him, trying to get an understanding of what happened. The boy has been just innocently talking to the media and revealing everything that has been asked of him.
हमने पहलगाम में 5 पॉइंट देखे थे। उसमें जो मिनी स्विट्जरलैंड है सबसे टॉप वाला था। उधर हम गए थे, 10-15 मिनट ही रहे थे, भूख लगी थी तो खाना खा रहे थे, तभी गन फायरिंग की आवाज आई थी। हमें लगा कुछ हुआ था। हमने पूछा भी वो रेस्टोरेंट वाले से कि क्या हुआ, उन्हें भी कुछ नहीं पता था। तो जब वो आतंकवादी ज्यादा गोली मारे हैं तब सबको पता चला कि टेररिस्ट घुसा है, तो हम छुप गए। उन लोगों ने ढूंढ लिया। हमको तो वो 2 दिखे थे और एक ने आके बोला मुसलमान अलग हो जाओ और हिंदू अलग हो जाओ, जेंट्स खाली। और बाद में हिंदू के सारे जेंट्स को गोली से मार दिया।
That young boy, I just breaks my heart to hear him. That's one of the medias he's spoken to of the many, of the hundreds maybe. That's Vinay Nerwal, a naval officer who very recently had married this young lady, and they had gone for a honeymoon, and she had to come back alone. And this image just breaks my heart. She spoke extensively during the funeral about how proud she is of her husband, how brave he was, and how because of him the country survives. It was just heartbreaking to see her. Chandra, who was 62 years of age, he was killed in front of his daughter and his 2 grandchildren. You know, I was supposed to speak to his daughter today, and I did try to convince her, but she was just not in a state of mind. She said initially she will and then backtracked, and I totally understand. I can only imagine what she's going through. But at this point, the kind of media glare, the fact that the family members' pictures are all over, and it's not just the ones who have died, but the entire family's images are all over. So does this increase threat perception to these families? That's another aspect here that we should look into. Of course, we have our guests who join us to give us a little more in detail, but I'm going to first take it to our psychologist who joins us, our psychiatrist, Deepak Rajhera, Director and Chief Psychiatrist, Hope Care India. Thanks very much, Deepak. I'll also introduce Lieutenant General Arun Sahni, retired, former General Officer, Commanding-in-Chief, Indian Army, and the President, Information Security Council of India. I also have General Raj Shukla, who's retired as former General Officer, Commanding-in-Chief, ARTRAC. Thanks very much. I'll start with our psychiatrist as I spoke extensively about the mental trauma and how this will remain. Deepak Raheja, we're seeing such media glare and spotlight on all the families there. The young child who's speaking to the media, he's being howled. I am guilty of it. But at this point, how would you view this situation? In a case like this, in a situation like this, what kind of damage does this do?
So essentially, as you say, it is heartbreaking and heart-wrenching for us. You can imagine the amplified effect it would have on the family. And to the 9-year-old who was talking, I think he's still in just a total state of denial. He's probably not even processing the trauma and the aftermath of the traumatic regression in development that he's probably likely to be subjected to the acute stress reaction and PTSD, to the chronic long drawn grief reaction. It can lead to nightmares. It can lead to a state of hyperarousal and a sympathetic stimulation. It can lead to panic disorders. For a young child like that, for the parent to be suddenly killed like this can lead to huge amount of developmental regression. So this is like the whole charged up situation, which possibly dichotomizes and prevents the families from even being able to process it. It is only after a few weeks when the reality will dawn, when the mourning will get to its peak, when the crowds will go away, when the media will go away, when this whole sense of being a martyr and having probably felt slain for the country, for a sense of altruism that possibly also draws on the family, that they want to be instrumental in bringing about a change. But when all this theater and this charged up energy goes away, which it will, that's when the reality begins to sink in. And these are people who are going to need very long drawn support in terms of grief counseling, in terms of support system, in terms of self-help groups that should come out of the sub community which is exposed to this trauma. And obviously if medication is required. So these are people who are going to need very intensive mental health interventions in terms of being able to process the grief and trauma that they have been subjected to.
If I could bring in General Arun Sahni's views on this. Sir, you may have been part of a battlefield or have been privy to stories coming in from families that have been torn from their loved ones. What does it really take for a family to survive a blow like this?
Good evening, Nabila. Firstly, I think the medical symptoms were very well explained by the doctor. But may I put it, it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
I think grief is really personal as far as this is concerned. And I think he's correctly brought out. The younger child is the one who's going to be the most affected because as he grows up, this image will remain, and whether he becomes biased in his opinions as he grows up, it might manifest in that kind of a behavior pattern and his particular character trait. But more importantly, I would say, I think it's the close family, and that's the greatest strength in India, that you have our close relations, you have your brothers, sisters, you have your colleagues in front, and they support you. It's a little different for the army martyrs, because we do have the support structure of the armed forces, which actually treats every member like a family member. So whether you're there physically or not, your relationship with your kith and kin who have served in that same regiment or the same unit actually gives you the strength to be able to bear it much more, with a lot more of resoluteness and equanimity when you see an individual. But I think support structures of the family, of the relationships, sharing memories and interacting with fellow people who've been through the same kind of trauma will actually be a requirement. We saw that when we were in Sri Lanka, because we saw that not only because the situation was very different, whether it was with the people who were died in collateral damage, or you saw some of them who passed away, who were your colleagues, people who were serving with you. So I would say that what he has said, yes, but it's an uphill battle. It's a battle that they have to do. They have to live and they have to overcome this grief. And I think the biggest strength would be that if they can, while collecting and sort of tackling the
Yeah.
grief, they carry on and get busy in the routine of life and the mundane of life with the support of all those who are their close, loved, and dear ones. I think that's how it should really pan out.
I'm not too sure, General Raj. I will come to you on India's preparedness, on how we intend to respond to Pakistan. But would you want to share an anecdote of your experience on families, being stolen of their joy, of their loved ones? This has happened way too many times. We know the number of soldiers who are taken away along our border areas. Here, there are civilians. They don't even know what it means to part with a loved one. Soldiers' families are usually prepared, I'm assuming. I guess we can never be prepared. But when it happens to a civilian, what message would you tell the families? They're, of course, enraged, angry to a point that they want revenge. I heard family members say that we want nothing less than the head of the terrorist on the ground, on Indian soil.
So, thank you for getting me on your show. Sorry, I clicked the wrong button.
We can hear you and see you.
And see me, all right.
Yeah.
So, I just want to say this, that it is extremely painful. It is heart-wrenching. I mean, just add, and the family's trauma cannot be described. General Sahani and the psychologist gentleman, I think Dr. Raheja, they put it very well. One has seen it so many times. I mean, the Kaluchak incident, I think about 10, 12 years back, where the families of soldiers in Kaluchak in Jammu were hit, was something like this. So it is absolutely heart-wrenching. It is horrendous. Look at the sheer savagery. I'm told some honeymoons were converted into funerals. You've shown images of, fathers being shot dead in cold blood before their sons. So it is, how does one describe all this except to say that it is extremely painful? It is heart-wrenching. But I think the pain and anguish of Pahalgam must not dissipate in anger. We must do something very purposeful, and I can come to that when you pose that question to me.
We'll come back to you. A quick word from our psychiatrist on the panel on how soon should intervention come. For a lot of people, I could say a lot of my elderly at home, for example, would not even believe in counseling. I'm saying this through experience of my own. They don't even believe in it. You have our older generation who says, just get running, get back to working, meet your friends, go out, just distract yourself. How important is clinical intervention in a case like this?
So, actually, counseling necessarily does not mean going to a professional. It also means the community standing by you. It also means self-help groups coming out of this sub-community who support each other. It also means the support standing by you. It also means a meaningful continuum of the trauma and the hope that can be instilled, which doesn't need to be violent necessarily, like I want the head of the terrorist on the soil, but a meaningful continuum of how this could be culminated, and maybe something that visibly positively comes out of it, which can be a huge resilience producing factor in the intrapsychic.
How are people equipped? I mean, I would only imagine if I had to talk to someone who's lost their loved one in this attack, I have no idea what to say.
So a lot of time, a professional just starts by being there. It is not the words. It is being able to empathize, and that empathy becomes unconditional when you're not trying to put too many words into what you're trying to communicate. So it's just your body language, your eye contact, the fact that you truly care, and I think this sensitivity needs to be carried amongst all who are present there right now, from the state representing the state, from the security system, the army, the policing, the state, the politician, the media. These are the first line contacts. And amongst, like I said, when all this dissipates, when everybody goes home in a couple of weeks and nobody is talking about it, that's when it will begin to hit the families hard,
Yeah.
which is why in our culture, there is a Chautha and then there is a Termi, because these are very important landmarks. There is an anniversary, because that's when grief begins to catch you by
Yeah.
surprise. You feel you've handled it, but it comes back with a vengeance. So it is important in continuation for us to create that support system within the society, and give them being able to impart the mental health resilience so they can cope with it adequately.
Right. Dr. Deepak, I really appreciate your time and your expertise on this. Thank you very much for joining us. Let me get back to General Raj Shukla. You wanted to add a point there. And of course, when you say meaningful response, what can be meaningful here? We see India's military drills that have begun. They are sharpening their arsenal, be it the Air Force, the Navy. There's action in every direction. What, in your sense, is meaningful response?
Before the response, can I just add a thought?
Sure,
just
please
crossed
do.
my mind. You see, Dr. Raheja is absolutely right. Once the immediate grief subsides and you get on with the normal challenges of life, that is when it gets difficult for survivors of those who have been so mercilessly killed. Now, I don't know how you can recreate it in the civilian system, but the army, because of its Poltons and its regiments, its battalion ecosystem, they will take care of these sons and daughters for life by making them participate in every event, a major celebration, a wedding. So in that sense, the ecosystem helps them transit all the challenges of life. And so the loss of a father is substituted in many ways. It can never be fully taken care of. Now, how do we do that in the civil system? I'm not too sure. But in the army, at least, that ecosystem has worked very well. That was just a thought.
Right, right. Well, we've heard the doctor and you on this. If I could get to now our Army's preparedness, General Arun, your take, a quick word on how, what approach is India considering? The Indus Water Treaty seems to be one aspect that has most hurt Pakistan, because you see huge protests, large-scale protests that have been launched by civilians in Pakistan, where they're condemning the government, and at the same time seem very frustrated with Pakistan as a nation at this point. The civilians itself are turning against their regime.
Uh, uh, Let me say, Nabila, the response has to be at two levels.
Yeah.
We have seen the issue as far as kinetic and non-kinetic is concerned. The non-kinetic has started, whether it's the Indus Water Treaty or the revoking of visas, sending back people, and actions which is the start of a large number of diplomatic and I'm sure economic initiatives that might come up over a period of time to make it hurt as far as Pakistan is concerned. But when we come into the realm of looking at a visible response, two things have to be very clear. I would like to divide it into two categories. The strategic response, that is where the political leadership comes up. The operational tactical actions that would happen, hitting camps, firing across, neutralizing people who are coming, will continue, which would, I'm sure, continue as has been the case now. But I think when you look at the strategic level, I think there you have to look at a kinetic response, which has to be visible, which has to have irrefutable evidence, and which has to be sustained. And it has to be now targeted at not just at the terrorist infrastructure, which is just the peripheral thing. If 10 go, 10 others will come in 10 days later. So that's not really the issue. I think the people who are concerned is the deep state, which is the Pak army, and the political hierarchy, which has been instrumental or party to these kind of decision making. How do you hit that? And I think the Indus Water Treaty indirectly is hitting it by the fact because you're targeting the Punjabi Mussalman. When you hit the Punjabi Mussalman, who's the dominant force as far as the current architecture is concerned in that country, you would have actually started hurting his economic interests, his other interests, as well as bring down the image. So I think targets that will have to be selected will have to be such that we impact these. Should it be Hafiz Saeed? Should it be Murid Ke? Should it be good? I think I'll leave it to the people who are currently in chair to take that formal decision. But I would say that it would have to be a high visibility target with which you can give irrefutable evidence. The second aspect that I would like to say, as far as the strategic targets are concerned, there are standoff and non-standoff weapons that you have. So it would be contact, non-contact. But the point that has to come in, and which is what these exercises and drills are indicating, that the armed forces will have to be prepared. We have to remember that when Russia-Ukraine war started, Russia went in hunky-dory with its integrated battle groups, thinking in the next 5 days they're going to be sitting in Kyiv. But the story turned out differently because you had an enemy who has the capability to fight back. And today you're seeing nearly literally 2 years down the line, a battle of attrition.
Yeah.
So I think when you take this kind of a kinetic action, we will have to be prepared for a response which will come from Pakistan.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that we are well prepared to be able to gain in areas where we want to gain and ensure that we can resist them in areas where we might not want any of such gains to be materializing as far as the enemy is concerned. So I think when you are looking at it, the two issues remain. I think the Prime Minister will have to take a call because any kinetic action will demand, get a reaction. And that reaction, how it will manifest, is something that we will have to play. And that is how they will have to select the target.
So,
the second issue is sustain. It cannot be a one-off like what had happened in Balakot or in surgical strike. You do it, and now you keep hitting repeatedly till you want to give a lesson which will ensure that the sustained effort over the next year, 2 years will ensure that we are not really looking at a visible political gain in this particular action, but are looking at bringing an end to this kind of structures.
Constant conflict. Yeah, as we're to the end of the show, I'm going to end with General Raj. So your take on Pakistan's response. In fact, one of the interviews I hear, he says the world should be very closely watching this dangerous dispute. It could very well end with a nuclear face-off. These kind of alarming statements. Not sure where Pakistan gets the conviction to speak, but tell us on how this could really end. How do you envision this?
So, Nabila, just let me make 4 quick points.
Yeah.
How do I see the situation? One is that we must not understate the monumentality of the challenge. It is a monumental challenge. In fact, it is a seminal challenge for Indian statecraft. And let me tell you why and what we need to do. So first is this terror ecosystem of Pakistan held by General Asim Munir, architect-in-chief of this heinous act, sheer savagery, the religious targeting, this whole angle of communal terror. You know, firstly, he was responsible for dog whistling this, his so-called Takrir of 16th April. And for all the reasons that we have just discussed, for the visuals that you showed, this has taken terror to a new low, even by the lowly metrics of Pakistani terror. So that has to be understood. Because of this, Pakistan has left the Indian state with no option but to respond. And that response has to be of such a nature that it restores deterrence. The Balakot-induced deterrence seems to have worn off. Now, how do you restore deterrence? By making sure that all that you do takes out of the Pakistani mind space one thing, that terror cannot be used as a tool of statecraft. 2 things. One is what we've done, these diplomatic measures, hard things like the Indus Water Treaty. Pakistan is rattled. All this nuclear stuff is a sheer bogey because he's rattled. And the second point I would like to make is that there will be a bevy of responses, but this time at the forefront of this bouquet of responses has to be calibrated kinetics. It has to be delivered to teach Pakistan a lesson. Now, in this kinetics, there are a range of options across domains. General Sani was speaking about them. There are number of instruments. There are options in the escalatory ladder. There are wise people to make those choices. We will maximize lethality, de-risk them. At the end of the day, if our larger statecraft could also consider this, our targeting array needs to target not only the terror camps, but ISI installations, command centers. And ultimately, if we can make this point, because the diplomatic space seems to be in our favor, to get the international community to this, that the Pak army, the ISI, and the architect-in-chief, they are part of this terror apparatus. And this terror apparatus has to be isolated. Now, this is a huge challenge, and therefore it's a seminal moment before our statecraft. But I think under a very strong political leadership, it is eminently doable. We didn't ask for this. We've been severely provoked, and we need to respond.
A tough stand that India has to take, and it seems like the Indian government at this point has shown the resolve. I really appreciate your time for joining us. Thank you very much, both of you. All right, we will continue tracking updates coming in on the Pahalgam terror attack. But for now, it's a wrap from me. Thanks very much. I'll be back right here, same time on Monday. Have a great weekend.